When your own son replies, "Wrong number," to your Father's Day message, it doesn't just hurt, it destroys something deep inside you. I wasn't expecting a long call or even a thank you. I just wanted him to know that I was proud of him. Just that. One simple truth. And yet, his 2 words, cold and precise, cut deeper than silence ever could. 3 years ago, I stood outside his apartment building for 4 hours. I had flown in unannounced, holding a birthday gift he never opened. He never came out. That was after he stopped answering my calls, after his mother passed, and I didn't make it back in time. I've written him 37 letters since then, all unanswered, until today. When I texted, "Happy Father's Day, I'm proud of the man you've become," and got, "Wrong number." What kind of father deserves that? Maybe me. Maybe I failed more than I thought. Or maybe, just maybe, he still cares enough to respond, even if it's through a wall of hurt. And if that's true, then I'll take my first step back into a story I long abandoned. Because what happened next will break your heart, then slowly stitch it back together. If you've ever loved someone who pushed you away, or if you've ever wanted a second chance, stay. This isn't just a story about regret. It's about what happens when someone decides not to give up. The kitchen was quiet. The kind of quiet that hums in your ears when there's nothing left to distract you. Not the ticking of a clock, not the whistle of a kettle, just silence. Charles sat alone, a mug of lukewarm coffee in his hand, untouched since 8:43 a.m. He had stared at the message on his phone for 20 minutes before even blinking. "I'm proud of you, son." Sent, 9:03 a.m. Delivered, and below it, just 2 words. Wrong number. That was all it took. 2 words to undo every effort he'd spent the past 5 years building up the courage to send. He'd thought about that message for weeks, practiced it, rewrote it, deleted it, rewrote it again. The timing mattered. Father's Day always did. Even if Nathan had stopped celebrating it years ago, now it felt like a joke, a punishment, a confirmation of something Charles had feared but never said out loud. He no longer existed in his son's world. He stood slowly, joint stiff, from more than just age, and shuffled over to the bookshelf where an old family photo still sat. A younger version of himself, arms wrapped around a 5-year-old Nathan, both grinning under the sun at Cannon Beach. His late wife, Evelyn, had taken that photo. Her laughter was almost audible in Charles's memory. He wiped the glass frame with his sleeve, the motion soft, almost reverent. "I tried," he whispered. But the past didn't answer. The last time Charles and Nathan had spoken face to face was at Evelyn's funeral. That day had cracked something wide open, something that never quite sealed again. Nathan had stood stiff at the graveside, eyes dry, mouth a thin line. When Charles approached to say something, anything, Nathan had turned away. Later, in the hallway outside the chapel, Charles had tried again. "I know this is hard," he'd said, "but we need each other now." Nathan had looked at him like a stranger. "Did you even know she was in the hospital the last week?" "I was in Tokyo. My flight." Nathan's jaw tightened. "You weren't here, Dad. That's all that matters." After that, the silence began. Calls went unanswered. Letters returned unopened. A wall erected brick by brick, and Charles had no tools left to dismantle it. He sank into the worn armchair by the window. The June sun streamed in, too bright for the mood in his chest. Regret had a weight to it, he thought, heavier with time. He'd thought it would get easier. It hadn't. He remembered Nathan's graduation day, another milestone marred by absence. Charles had a critical meeting that morning. It's just one ceremony, he'd told Evelyn, who'd looked at him like she didn't recognize the man standing in their kitchen. It's his only high school graduation, Charles. I'll make it up to him. I'll take him to dinner. I'll get him something special. He never made it to dinner. He never got the gift. Nathan didn't say anything back then. He never yelled, never accused. But he grew quieter, more distant. And Charles, always preoccupied, always justifying the missed moments with promises of future quality time, didn't notice the space between them widening until it became a canyon. Maybe that's why wrong number stung so badly. It wasn't just rejection, it was a declaration, a verdict. The judge and jury had ruled. Charles no longer qualified as dad. Still, part of him couldn't help but wonder, was it really a wrong number? Or was that Nathan's way of drawing a final line in the sand? He reread the message for the 100th time. The punctuation was perfect, no typos, no accidental tap. It was deliberate, precise. Wrong number. He opened his contacts and scrolled to Nathan's name. The number hadn't changed in 7 years. He knew, because he'd called it on every birthday, every Father's Day, every Christmas since they stopped speaking. The voicemail was still the same, generic, emotionless, a robot reading digits. But it was his son's voice, or had been. What if Nathan had changed his number and someone else really did receive that text? What if Charles had spent all this time clinging to a digital ghost? Or what if the cruelest truth was also the simplest? Nathan saw the message, read it, and chose to respond with cold fiction, just to make a point. The ache behind Charles's ribs tightened. He pressed the phone against his chest and let his eyes close. "I'm proud of you, son," he said aloud to no one. "Even if you don't want to hear it." Nathan still remembered the smell of the auditorium. Waxed floors, dusty velvet curtains, a faint trace of metal from the piano keys he had practiced on for weeks. He had worn a white shirt that was just a little too big, sleeves rolled once at the cuffs, and polished shoes that pinched his toes. It was his first recital. He was 10. Before going on stage, he scanned the rows of folding chairs for one face, just one. Evelyn sat near the front, smiling nervously and holding a camcorder in her lap. Beside her, the seat she had reserved with a sticky note that read, "Dad," remained painfully empty. He had written the note himself. "Please come to my piano recital. I'll play your favorite, Claire de Lune. It starts at 6. I'll be really happy if you come." He never asked for anything else that year. No birthday gift, no new bike. Just that. But Charles had called an hour before the show. "Something came up," he said. "An investor dinner in San Francisco. I'll be on a flight at 5. Rain check, buddy?" Nathan had nodded into the phone, trying to sound older than 10. "Sure, Dad." He played that night, every note trembling through clenched fingers. The applause was kind, but not enough to fill the void in the front row. Years later, Nathan sat beside his mother's hospital bed as the machines beeped with haunting regularity. Evelyn had grown smaller than he remembered, her once warm hands now fragile and papery. She whispered about things that made no sense. Dandelions, Charles's lasagna, the house on Alder Street. He had called his father from the hospital cafeteria. "She's not going to last much longer. Maybe a day." Charles replied, "I'm in Seoul, meeting with a new manufacturing partner. Can this wait?" Nathan didn't answer. He just hung up. Evelyn passed away the next evening. Charles didn't arrive until 3 days later. straight from the airport, still in his suit. The tie loosened, but knotted enough to show he hadn't gone home. Nathan hadn't spoken to him since, and yet, despite the years of silence, the bitterness never fully numbed the ache of what he had lost, or maybe never truly had. Nathan once tried. On his 26th birthday, he mailed Charles an album filled with childhood photos, beach trips, Halloween costumes, snapshots of cereal-stained mornings. He thought it might spark something, a call, a visit, a memory worth rebuilding. When Nathan came by his father's house a few months later, unexpected, just passing through, he saw the album still in its original packaging, stuffed in a stack of mail, unopened. He never went back. Across the miles, Charles had lived with his own version of silence. It wasn't loud or angry. It was colder than that. It was absence, dressed up as dignity. But he didn't stop trying, at least not entirely. Every June, December, and October, he wrote, sometimes by email, mostly by hand. Thinking of you. Your mom would be proud. I'm sorry for the times I failed. No responses. Not once. For 4 years straight, he sent birthday cards with a short note and a check inside. The checks were never cashed. The envelopes returned, marked refused. Once, 2 winters ago, he drove to Nathan's workplace, an architecture firm downtown. He waited in the lobby, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. I'm here to see Nathan Morris, he told the receptionist. She smiled awkwardly. I'm sorry, sir. We can't let anyone upstairs without a scheduled appointment. Charles nodded. Could you tell him his father's here? She picked up the phone, whispered something, then shook her head. I'm afraid he's unavailable. Charles left the box on the counter. It was a fountain pen. Nathan had wanted one when he was a kid, said it made him feel like a real writer. The package was mailed back 3 days later. That rejection should have been the final one. But there's something about being a parent. It tricks you into believing there's still time. Always another chance. Even when logic says otherwise. Last year, while cleaning out a storage unit, Charles stumbled across a shoebox of unsent drafts, folded cards, old photographs, and a single envelope he didn't recognize. His name and return address were written on it, but the seal was unbroken. Inside, his handwriting greeted him like a ghost from the past. Dear Nathan, I don't know if you'll ever open this. I just want you to know. I still remember your piano recital. I wasn't there, but your mom filmed it. I watched it 3 times. I cried. I was proud then. I'm proud now. The letter had been mailed 5 years ago. Somehow, it had made its way back to him, still sealed, still silent. He held it for a long time. Then carefully, he slid it back into the envelope, returned it to the box, and shut the lid. Even silence, he realized, has a voice. You just have to listen differently. Charles had spent the better part of the week replaying Nathan's 2-word message like a broken recording. Wrong number. Yet the silence that followed was more tormenting than the message itself. He hadn't responded. What could he say to that? What could possibly change a mind that had already erased him? Still, on a Wednesday morning, while organizing the drawer where Evelyn's keepsakes remained untouched, Charles found a faded Polaroid. He didn't even remember taking it, but there it was. Him and 6-year-old Nathan, laughing with their faces pressed together, ice cream melting in both hands. It had been a Sunday at the zoo. The elephants, Nathan's favorite animal, were behind them mid-stride. Charles stared at the photo for minutes before he picked up his phone. He scanned his camera, took a picture of the Polaroid, and added a short caption. Remember this day? His finger hovered over the send button longer than he cared to admit. Then, tap. Message sent. He placed the phone down and walked away. He couldn't bear to watch it be ignored like the others. It buzzed 3 hours later. I remember. I was 6. You carried me on your shoulders all day. I had a sore neck for a week. Charles stood frozen in the middle of the hallway. He reread the message 3 times to be sure. Nathan remembered. Not only that, he answered with warmth, or at least not with ice. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A crack in the wall. He sat down in the living room and cried for the first time in months. Not a loud sob, just the slow, steady stream of someone letting something finally escape. His chest felt like it had been released from a long compression. He typed back, I didn't know you remembered. That was one of the best days of my life. There was no reply after that. Hours passed, then a full day, and then, at 6:12 p.m. the next evening, the second message came in. That was the last day I felt like I had a dad. The floor beneath him seemed to disappear. Charles read it again, hoping he had misunderstood, hoping there was some nuance he missed. But it was clear. That beautiful day, the one that lived in his memory as a triumph of fatherhood, was, for Nathan, the last flicker of something real. Everything after had been distance, disappointment, absence. He gripped his phone tighter than necessary and whispered, I didn't know I lost you that early. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat on the porch with a blanket around his shoulders, watching the moon rise and fall like a slow breath across the sky. He wanted to respond, to say something meaningful, but nothing felt adequate. By dawn, he tried again. I'm sorry I vanished. I can't change the past, but I'm here now. Give me a chance to be present. It took 2 days, but the reply came. I have a son. He's 5. Charles blinked. The words didn't register at first. Nathan had a child. He was a grandfather. Somewhere there was a boy, his blood, who didn't even know he existed. He leaned forward in his chair, phone in hand, heart racing. I didn't know. What's his name? Silence. Then a simple reply. Miles. Charles whispered it aloud. Miles. He imagined what the boy might look like. Blonde hair like Nathan had as a child. Or maybe Evelyn's deep brown eyes. Did he like animals? Ice cream? Music? He texted again. Can I meet him? No reply. He waited an hour, then 2, then the rest of the day. Finally, late into the night, his phone buzzed. You can't meet someone who doesn't know you exist. Another silence. Then a second message with an image attached. Charles tapped it open with trembling hands. It was a picture of a boy standing on a soccer field, one hand on his hip, the other shielding his eyes from the sun. He wore a navy blue jersey, number 12, and a crooked smile that sent a jolt through Charles's body. It was him. Or rather, it was a mirror of himself when he was 5. The hair, the nose, even the slightly uneven posture. He nearly dropped the phone. Tears welled up, not out of sentimentality, but out of the realization of what he had truly missed. It hadn't just been Nathan he lost. It was this boy. 5 years of birthdays, scraped knees, first words, first steps. A second chance he never knew he had, slipping through his hands. He typed, He looks just like you did. Nathan responded, That's what scares me. Charles swallowed hard. Was that a crack in the door, or a warning not to knock again? He thought about it for hours. Then he decided on honesty. I can't erase the hurt I caused you, but maybe I can still be something for him. Something better. No reply that night. The next morning, Charles woke to a single message. One day. Maybe. He read it again. Then he read it out loud. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel hope without guilt. Maybe it wasn't today, but one day, that was enough to keep breathing. It started with a text that Charles reread so many times, he could recall every punctuation mark. Miles wants to know who his grandfather is. Can we do a video call tomorrow? Just like that, no build-up, no warning. A line that shattered routine and reconstructed it in seconds. Charles stared at the screen, blinking as if trying to confirm it was real. Then he typed back, hands unsteady. Absolutely. Just say when. The next evening, just past 7 p.m., Charles cleaned the cluttered bookshelf behind his desk and put on a collared shirt, even though he knew it wouldn't matter. Still, he wanted to look like someone's grandfather, not a man who had lived in silence and regret. The screen lit up. For the first time in years, Nathan's face filled the display. He looked older, of course. The boy Charles had left behind had become a man with the same creased forehead and wary eyes. There was hesitation in his expression, calculated caution, but no anger, not outright. Next to him sat a boy, maybe 5 or 6, shifting in and out of frame with curiosity. Charles smiled, his breath catching. You must be Miles. The boy waved shyly, then whispered to Nathan, He looks like you, Daddy. Nathan smirked faintly. No, he looks like him. Charles laughed. The sound cracked and genuine. You've got great eyes, kid. They talked about soccer, Miles's love for dinosaurs, and his upcoming kindergarten graduation, which involved paper hats and juice boxes. Charles listened more than he spoke, letting every word from his grandson etch itself onto a part of him he thought was gone. Then Nathan surprised him. Do you remember when I first walked? He asked, the camera slightly angled now as Miles left the screen to fetch a toy. Charles blinked. You were 11 months old. You took 2 steps from the coffee table and fell straight into the dog bowl. Nathan chuckled. That's the story Mom used to tell. It's true, Charles said, smiling. You looked at me and said, Dada, clear as a bell, scared the hell out of me. Nathan laughed softly. I don't remember it. I do, Charles replied. I remember every second. For a moment, the screen was silent. Just the sound of Miles in the background, humming. You know, Nathan said, he's never had a grandfather figure, not really. Charles nodded, unsure of what to say, afraid to say too much. I'd like to change that, if you'll let me. Another pause. Then, he asked if you could come visit. Charles leaned forward, voice tight. I'd love to. They settled on a weekend, 2 weeks away. Enough time for Nathan to prepare, he said. Enough time for Charles to believe this was real. He booked the flight that night, direct to Phoenix. Window seat. He even printed the boarding pass. Old habits from business travel surfacing as he laid out clothes he hadn't worn since Evelyn's funeral. Every day after that, he spoke to Nathan. Brief texts. A shared photo of Miles's drawing of a volcano. Charles replied with an old picture of Nathan's first science project, a potato battery. It felt like they were building something. Not quickly, but honestly. On the night before the flight, Charles packed carefully. He included the small wooden plane he had carved months ago, a gift he had once hoped to send but never dared. He tucked it into tissue paper and placed it beside a photo of Evelyn, which he would carry in his jacket pocket. The next morning, he arrived early at the airport, found a seat by the window, and watched planes lift off as if carrying someone else's future. His phone buzzed just after check-in. "I'm sorry. I can't do this. I changed my mind." The words sat on the screen, colder than anything before. No greeting, no punctuation, just a wall. Charles called immediately. It rang once, then nothing. He called again, straight to voicemail. On the third attempt, a robotic voice confirmed what he suspected. "This number is no longer accepting calls from this contact." Nathan had blocked him. He sat there, frozen. His boarding pass slipped from his hand and fluttered to the floor. A nearby couple laughed over coffee. A child played a game on a tablet, volume too loud. But around Charles, there was only silence. The plane he was supposed to board began loading. He didn't move. The photo of Evelyn pressed against his chest like a silent witness. The gift for Miles remained unopened in his carry-on. He sat until the gate closed, until the terminal emptied, until the airport grew quiet again. And then, for the second time in his life, Charles wept in public. Not because of what had been taken, but because of what had been offered, only to be yanked away the moment he reached for it. The day after the airport, Charles sat at his kitchen table, a single envelope before him, unsealed and waiting. It was the same kind of stationery he and Evelyn had used for Christmas letters years ago. Ivory, with faint gold trim, now slightly yellowed with age. He wrote slowly, not out of uncertainty, but because every word felt final. "Dear Nathan, I won't try again. This isn't because I'm angry. It's because I understand. You have a life, a son, a path you've walked without me, and I've interrupted it enough. I've knocked on a door that never owed me an answer. I just wanted you to know. Thank you for existing, for being mine, for being part of the only family I ever really had. And I'm sorry for every time I wasn't there when I should have been. For every minute I chose something else over you. For every silence that hurt more than words ever could. If nothing else, please keep the album. And if you open the journal, you'll find the words I never found the courage to say out loud. Maybe someday they'll mean something, or maybe not. That's your choice now. Goodbye, Nathan. Dad." He folded the letter, slipped it inside a padded envelope, and tucked the photo album inside. A chronological trail from Nathan's birth to his teenage years, interspersed with short handwritten notes from Charles. Captions, stories, regrets, all scribbled in blue ink. Alongside it, he placed a journal bound in leather, untitled but worn soft at the corners. He labeled the package simply, "To Nathan Morris." Then he dropped it off at the post office. That night, he turned off his phone. The next morning, he canceled his number, closed his email accounts, deleted every app that connected him to the outside world. No more doorbells, no more news, no more waiting. He wasn't angry. He wasn't broken. He was just done. Charles spent his days walking. Mornings were for coffee and bird watching, afternoons for reading. Nights were quiet. Sometimes he'd talk to Evelyn's picture, not out of habit, but because it made the house feel less like a museum. Weeks passed, then a month. Miles away, in a quieter moment than he'd ever planned for, Nathan opened the box. He didn't touch the album at first. He wasn't ready. But the journal he held. He flipped through the first pages casually, but then he stopped. The entries weren't chronological. They were emotional. Memories, confessions, apologies, scribbled like puzzle pieces. One page read, "The day you walked into the kitchen with a scraped knee and asked for a bandage, I froze. Not because I didn't care, but because I had no idea how to be gentle. Your mother taught me everything. Without her, I was only half a father. Another, I missed your high school graduation to close a deal I don't even remember the name of. I've remembered missing that moment every single day since. Then one page, nearly torn from pressure. When you stopped calling, I thought I deserved it. But I still listened to your voicemail every Sunday night, just to hear your voice. I saved every sound. That was the only way I could prove to myself you still existed. Nathan stopped reading. His chest hurt. His son, Miles, peeked into the room. Daddy? Nathan wiped his eyes quickly. Yeah? Miles pointed to the photo album. Is that Grandpa's book? Nathan looked at the album, unopened on the table. Miles asked, Did you love him? The question pierced deeper than it should have. Nathan knelt beside his son. I forgot him. For a long time. But no, he never stopped loving me. That night, Nathan sat on the couch, the album open across his lap. He traced his childhood through the lens of his father. Moments he didn't know were cherished. Details only someone paying close attention would remember. A note beneath a Halloween photo read, You wanted to be a dragon, but the costume was 2 sizes too small. You wore it anyway. You said, It's not about how big the wings are. It's about the roar. I've never been prouder. Nathan cried for a long time. Not out of sorrow, but because he finally understood what had always gone unsaid. 2 mornings later, he packed a small bag. Miles watched as he zipped it up. Where are we going? Nathan placed a hand on his son's shoulder. To meet someone important. They drove 7 hours north. No music. Just highway and memory. When they pulled up to the modest house with overgrown hedges and a rusted mailbox, Nathan hesitated at the walkway. He saw the curtains flutter, a light go on inside, but no movement. He knocked once. No answer. He waited. Then, the door creaked open. Charles stood there, thinner, older, unsure. Nathan said nothing at first. Then he stepped aside. Miles, he said, this is your grandfather. The boy stepped forward, clutching the journal. Charles didn't reach for him. He didn't move. Miles held out the journal. You forgot this. Charles took it with shaking hands, eyes locked on Nathan's. I wasn't expecting... Nathan cut him off softly. I wasn't ready. Until I was. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was sacred. Charles hadn't heard footsteps on that porch in 20 years. The boards groaned as someone approached, but it was a sound he no longer hoped for. He didn't expect guests. He didn't expect anything. But when he opened the door, there stood Nathan, with Miles beside him. He didn't speak. Not at first. And neither did Charles. There was something too fragile in the moment, like breath held too long, or a photograph that might fade if touched. Nathan looked older than Charles remembered, his face carved by years Charles hadn't been allowed to witness. Yet there was softness there too, a quiet that spoke louder than words ever could. Charles stepped back, unsure whether to invite them in or ask if this was a mistake. You okay if we come in? Nathan asked. Charles nodded, mouth too dry to form a sound. He stepped aside. They didn't hug. They didn't cry. They just walked into the small kitchen that had gone unused for days, maybe weeks. Charles reached for the kettle. Tea? He offered. Nathan nodded. Sure. Miles wandered the living room, fascinated by the bookshelf lined with old clocks and photo frames covered in dust. His small fingers hovered but didn't touch. Something in the stillness of the house taught him reverence. Charles poured the tea into chipped mugs. He added honey to his out of habit, then pushed it toward Nathan before realizing his son might prefer it plain. "It's fine," Nathan said, reading his father's hesitation. They sat in silence, the kind that used to be full of tension but now carried something else: acknowledgement, recognition, the first steps of rebuilding, done not with declarations, but with presence. Miles appeared in the doorway, holding something. "Is this you?" he asked, holding up a framed photo of young Charles with Evelyn on their wedding day. Charles nodded, eyes misting. "That's me, and your grandma." "She's pretty," Miles said, blunt and sincere. Charles chuckled. She really was. Then Miles set the photo down and did something Charles wasn't ready for. He ran to the table, wrapped his arms around Charles's waist, and said, "Hi, Grandpa." The word hit Charles like a prayer finally answered. Not shouted, not begged, just offered. He didn't cry, not in the traditional sense. No sobs, no audible heartbreak. But tears slipped down his face anyway, as quiet and sure as spring rain. "Hi, buddy," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm really glad to meet you." They stayed through the weekend. Miles slept on the couch, curled up under an old quilt Evelyn had made decades ago. Nathan stayed in the guest room, though neither of them slept much the first night. They sat outside instead, talking. "I kept thinking if I opened the door," Nathan said, staring at the stars, "you'd disappear again." "I'm not going anywhere," Charles said. "Not unless you want me to." Nathan didn't answer, but he didn't leave either. The following morning, they made pancakes. Miles helped stir the batter, dropping spoonfuls on the stove with clumsy excitement. The kitchen smelled like Saturday mornings used to. Before they left on Sunday evening, Nathan lingered at the door. "I still get angry sometimes," he admitted. "I'd be worried if you didn't," Charles said. "But I want this. Whatever this is. I want you to be in his life. In mine, too." Charles nodded slowly, blinking back the water, building behind his eyes. "Then I will be." They hugged. It wasn't long or tight, but it was real. The weeks after felt different. Charles found himself smiling at nothing. The silence in the house wasn't hollow anymore. It was restful. They started calling every Sunday. Sometimes it was Nathan. Sometimes Miles, asking about dinosaurs or school projects. Sometimes it was just a photo. Miles holding a soccer trophy or drawing a picture of Grandpa and me. Charles printed them all, pinned them to the fridge like a teenager. Time didn't rewind, but it softened the jagged edges. 1 year later, on Father's Day, Charles woke up early. He brewed his tea, sat by the window, and opened the small wooden box where he kept Evelyn's things. He held her wedding ring, whispered her name, and thanked her for being the bridge that had brought them all back together, even in absence. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Nathan. "Thanks, Dad, for not giving up." Charles stared at it, the simple words doing more than any long letter ever could. He replied with a photo. It showed his mantle, a framed photo of Nathan and Miles, now front and center, beside one of Evelyn and baby Nathan. Beneath it was a note. "You're all home now." Then, as the afternoon sun crept through the curtains, he placed both photos gently on the small altar he had set up beside Evelyn's favorite reading chair. He lit a candle, placed a teacup before them, and whispered, "We're still a family." Later, as he sat watching a hawk circle over the distant trees, he thought about the first message he ever sent that started all this. "I'm proud of you, son." He chuckled. Then he said aloud, not to anyone in particular, "I used to be a wrong number. But now I know. I was just the right one, calling too soon. And the wind outside, soft and forgiving, felt like Evelyn smiling back.